This is Fresh Tracks Weekly. The main focus of this week is still focusing on how Mike Lee wants to sell millions of acres of public land. There's been a massive response from the hunting community in opposition, which is great to see, but we also want to make sure that people are getting their facts straight. It's hard to focus on much more than this right now, but I am going to touch on a few other news stories from the week. The Trump administration just shut down what had previously been championed as a historic agreement that would have given the Northwest salmon and steelhead populations the best chance of recovering from their endangered and threatened status. Dak Collins with Outdoor Life reported on this story, interviewing Chris Wood of Trout Unlimited, telling the saga of how the cooperative agreement came to be. For years, the Columbia Basin had been embroiled in controversy over how to recover wild fish that had previously run up the lower Snake River. There were endless lawsuits pitting fish versus energy. 4 dams on the lower Snake restricted salmon from reaching their spawning habitat that historically supported the most productive salmon and steelhead fishery in the world. Salmon and steelhead now return at less than 2% of their historic highs, and many leading fisheries scientists state that breaching the 4 dams on the lower Snake is the best bet for saving the Pacific salmon. To be clear, this agreement that just got shut down wasn't even to breach the dams, but simply to get everyone at the negotiating table. It was the first time that all of the stakeholders were working together to find solutions to make everyone whole before plans for breaching the dam were even considered. Now, with the agreement terminated, tactics will revert to the old ways of litigating in courts where it's difficult for either side to make any progress. Last year, Arizona decided to move away from the statewide auction permits for all of their species for a multitude of reasons. But this is the first time that those tags are being raffled off instead of auctioned off. The Wild Sheep Foundation has raised millions of dollars for Arizona Game and Fish through auctioning sheep tags over the years, and they've been worried about being able to raise similar funds through a raffle. All of that said, Wild Sheep Foundation is still facilitating this Arizona sheep raffle, and they would happily prove themselves wrong by raising more money than the auction tag via selling chances at a raffle tag. A similar move on a smaller scale was done last year when Montana backcountry hunters and anglers attempted to raffle off the statewide mule deer tag for more than what the auction tag had previously gone for, and they ended up succeeding in raising a record amount. That being said, many are skeptical about raising a record amount for a sheep tag, especially when looking at recent years when many of these sheep tags are going for hundreds of thousands of dollars, with some states going up to $1 million. Personally, I'm a fan of the raffle tag as it at least gives me the slightest chance of winning by spending $50, and then I know that that $50 goes entirely to the Arizona Game and Fish to support wild sheep conservation. If you want to have your own chance at winning the statewide Rocky Mountain Bighorn raffle in Arizona, you can go to the link in the description, and maybe we can show that it's possible to raise similar amounts of money through a raffle. The Sportsmen's Alliance has been compiling evidence against what they have named the, quote, Fanatical Four, showing collusion between 4 members of the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife Commission and animal welfare groups. The Washington DFW Commission has been in the spotlight amongst hunter and angler groups recently, as they have seemingly been pushing an agenda to downplay the role of hunting, angling, and trapping in wildlife management. Washington Wildlife First is the most vocal group attempting to shift the department away from consumption as a method of wildlife management, which is kind of their way of tiptoeing around being mostly an anti-hunting group. The Sportsmen's Alliance submitted a public records request from the department in which they received numerous emails and texts showing planned private meetings between the 4 commissioners and Washington Wildlife First. The communications also seem to show the commissioners acknowledging that what they are doing is basically collusion, and on several instances where the department emails were forwarded to the commissioners' personal accounts, implying that there's more conversation happening in private. The Sportsmen's Alliance claims that these communications are blatant violations to open meetings laws, and they have taken this evidence and petitioned the Washington governor to remove the 4 involved commissioners. Eli Fournier of Meat Eater recently reported on a loophole that sporting good manufacturers have been using to avoid paying Pittman Robertson and Dingle Johnson excise taxes in recent years. Normally, excise taxes are collected from the manufacturer even if the products are made overseas, because the majority of these sporting good companies, at least historically, have had some sort of presence in the United States. And of course, these excise tax dollars are one of the major funding sources for conservation in the United States. But now, with websites like Amazon, Alibaba, or Temu, these transactions are occurring directly from overseas manufacturers, therefore circumventing the normal excise tax. Meat Eater interviewed the Vice President of Government Affairs for the American Sport Fishing Association to talk about how they are lobbying to pass the Sporting Goods Excise Tax Modernization Act. This act would essentially close this loophole and impose the same tax to foreign retailers that the domestic retailers currently pay, at least for fishing and archery equipment, which is where this loophole is currently being exploited. Apparently, it isn't an issue with firearms and ammunition as they are regulated by the ATF, which prevents this loophole from being used on those items. Seems like a common sense bill to modernize the tax, which needs to happen from time to time, as no one could have anticipated that the online retail options that we have today would have existed like this. All right, we just recorded a segment with Randy giving an update on his trip to DC, and he's going to fill us in on all of the BS, what is true, what is not. And even though there is some false reporting, this is still the biggest threat to public lands in our lifetime. Also, a heads up, I am an idiot at running a camera, so there's no footage of me for the majority of the podcast. So instead, we'll put up some relevant screenshots whenever I'm talking.
I got in at 1:30 this morning, and by the time I drove home, got into bed, I looked at the clock, it was almost 2:30 in the morning. And I promised you I'd be here bright and early, so
thanks for doing it. Thanks for doing it, and thanks for going to DC and meeting with those guys. So we got to hear an update. What went down there?
You know, I was there for 4 days, and you hear it from me why I go back there, right? I want to know the truth. I want to. I've built a lot of relationships back there. I don't want to just take what this quote unquote news source, right? Some news source that is dependent on clicks and likes and shares. They're going to have their own version of a story. And this issue is so important to me, and our audience puts so much trust in us. I have to go back there and find out. I'm not just going to be spoon-fed something. So I feel lucky that in all my years of going back there, I've built relationships with, staffers, with some of the delegations, some of the lobbyists, because there's lobbyists who are on these public land issues, somewhat from the right, somewhat from the left. So it gives me sources and ways to call each side and try to get the facts. I know that, okay, this side's going to have a little bit of a spin, this side's going to have a little bit of spin. But if they'll tell me the same facts, I know I'm working from a pretty strong foundation.
Yeah. And that's one thing I guess we should clear up, because there's been a huge response in the last week of people getting fired up because this could sell up to 3.3 million acres.
Right.
But there, like you said, it's hard to wade through all the BS, and there's been some misinformation, and some people are saying like they're going to sell 250 million acres. Yeah. And that's one thing we could clear up right now. So the 250 million acres is the land that would be potentially
available to be nominated.
Right. So they're not going to sell 250 million right now. But again, I mean, you can understand the worry that it might pave the way for that.
Absolutely.
Because those are the lands that qualify. But for this current amendment, which could change by the time this video is released because everything is happening very rapidly, but currently it's 0.5 to 0.75%,
which gets us to
public lands, which is
low end 2.2 million, high end maybe 3.5 million.
Right.
And
but which obviously is
huge.
Not to like take away from anything, but like it's just like I think it's important to just know exactly what we're talking about. Right. And then there's also currently, it's not talking about national parks. It's not talking about wilderness areas. It's not talking about national recreation areas. Right. However, if you look at the map of the potential acreage, there are some amazing places like that.
I pulled up the Wyoming map of potential acreage. I've killed 3 elk in spots on that map. My largest mule deer on that map, and I don't have enough fingers to count how many pronghorn I've killed on that map of Wyoming.
Right. So it's extremely concerning, but I think it's just helpful if you have your facts straight, because when you call or you send your email, and if you're just spouting these rumors and things that aren't true, then you just immediately get discounted, you know. So that being said, I mean, one of your biggest points was that, like, keep doing it, keep calling, keep sending emails, and but just try to be respectful, get your facts straight, but keep calling, keep emailing.
Right. I got there Sunday, and by the time I left Wednesday night, the tide of emails and phone calls that have been made is unbelievable, and people got to keep it up. If there's one absolute fact that maybe people think it's 9th grade civics, if enough people call and email, it makes a difference.
Yeah.
Because when I went back there Sunday, well, even last week when I was doing all my kind of prep for it, I was hearing that there's just no appetite to make this an issue. This is Mike Lee read the tea leaves of, and he's the Utah senator who proposed this big land sale bill. And if you've watched our prior videos, you know that. But this process that they're using gives the chairman of each committee the ability to just skip over their committee members. They get to do the markup. And that's what's going to go to get built into the whole package on the Senate floor. And that's when the non-chairman senators will get a chance to vote on it.
Yeah, which is crazy because, I mean, normally you would hope that in these committees that you get a chance for some debate and some public input. But right now it's just the speed at which things are happening when they're attaching it to this giant, the big, beautiful bill. It's just things just get lumped in and it just gets glossed over. It's almost like some of the people that are even in that committee aren't fully aware of what they're going to be.
They aren't even seeing the language. You can be a member of the Senate Energy and Natural Resources Committee, and you aren't seeing the language that your chairman is working on.
Yeah,
which is insane.
It's frustrating, but
all the other committees, their chairmen are including the members.
Yeah.
So,
but I guess.
So where I was going with that is this is changing. So when everyone told me, well, Senator Lee put this bill in there and he's going to get what he wants, you're kind of wasting your time to try to rally the troops. No, not wasting our time. By the time I left Wednesday evening, I'm hearing boy, this delegation is getting inundated. They're about ready to swing. This delegation is
the amount of people that I've seen come out of the woodwork in opposition to this is significant. And I think it's pretty obvious that even Mike Lee's constituents do not want this. We talked about that in the last episode too, how there's past surveys that show that most Utah residents do not want this. And yet here we are where it looks like it's dangerously close to happening.
Yeah. The last phone conference I had last Friday, I was kind of told, Randy, this isn't that big a deal in the bigger thing. I'm like, you guys are misreading the blowback that's going to happen on this in the West.
Yeah.
In the hunting community. And people that maybe are voting for you. You guys are completely missing the mark.
Yeah.
And as of this morning, most of them are like, we didn't see this one coming. I'm like, I don't want to say I told you so, but all of our audience told them so. And audiences far beyond us told them so.
Yeah, people are getting fired up. I saw there was, even the Sportsmen for Wildlife, which is normally a group that's pretty in bed with, the Utah politicians, and they're just in line, and they came out publicly opposed to this. So
there's not a hunting, fishing, public land group that has not come out against this. The industries are now coming out against it. The Motorhome Manufacturers Association came out against it.
Yeah.
So for people who are wondering how this process works, right? The Senate is this place of, I call it decorum and respect.
In theory.
But some people use that to their advantage. Like I would say Senator Lee is using that to say none of these, it's not the Senate style for anyone to come out and blast me on this. So I got to meet with a lot of the delegations back there. The House was they're in recess. They're all back home this week. So I got to meet with the senior staffers of House members, and I got to meet with some of the senators themselves. And, one of the things I think would be helpful to clear up, and I'll get to that, is before I left, and even when I was back there, I'm like, where are the key people? Who are the people who can make a difference here? And lucky for us, in the House, the name that everybody said right off the top of their head is your Congressman Ryan Zinke is the key in the House. And in the Senate, your Senator Steve Daines is the key in the Senate. I'm like, how the hell did that happen? Well, they're from Montana, and here you can get elected or unelected on public land issues in Montana.
For sure.
Everyone in D.C. knows that. And so we're lucky from that standpoint. So there was a bunch of reporting going on last week that Senator Daines cut a deal with Mike Lee. And I'm like, I better find out if that's true. It wasn't true. What it was is Senator Daines heard that there's something coming. And this is not from Senator Daines. They never speak of what goes on. But if you know enough lobbyists on the right and enough on the left, and you know enough staffers, pretty soon there's certain facts that are there in every report you get. And they couldn't come to a decision. You know, Senator Daines wanted something very precise, very concise, so that it wouldn't be this big blow up that we're seeing right now. Senator Lee, I'm not going to guess his motivations, but he's spent his career taking chances on selling public land. Well, no one on his committee even sees this bill until he throws it out there. And he specifically carved Montana out of it under the premise that if Senator Daines then goes and tries to get the support of other senators, they'd say, well, what are you complaining about, Mr. Montana? You're carved out. So it was kind of a tactic to try get, if you want to say, Montana nullified.
Right.
Because everyone knew any resistance to this was going to start with Senator Steve Daines.
Yeah.
And so I met with him for quite a while. And the number of people sitting in his office to meet him when I showed up, I'm like, man, I got to take a number and stand in line. He gave me a half hour of his time, which, as busy as he is, it's crazy. And it was just all about this. And, you know, again, in the Senate, no one lays their cards down. So here's how it's going to happen, just so people understand this process. Right now, the big, beautiful bill, the House, right, about a month ago, we got in a big worry about this because the House provision was to sell a bunch of land in Utah and a bunch of land in Nevada.
Right.
Congressman Zinke got that stripped out. So then it goes over to the Senate, and right now, they're doing their thing. They call it the markup. Well, whatever ends up coming out of the Senate goes back to the House, and they try to reconcile. And the idea is, because the president says he wants this bill by the 4th of July, whatever comes out of the Senate, they want to make sure doesn't have a lot of delay in the House. So right now, the Senator Majority Leader Thune from South Dakota, he's got to manage all this. Mm-hmm. And over on the House side, Speaker of the House Johnson has to manage all the House side. So they talk a lot. And they're trying to figure out, all right, where are the big bumps in the road? Well, you read about Medicaid cuts, and you read about, well, there's not enough budget cuts. So there's a bunch of issues there that are higher priority than public lands. The last thing either of them want is for this bill to get delayed because Mike Lee wants to sell a ton of public land.
Right. And so that's if enough senators, voice their opposition to this,
right,
then they could get it killed before it goes to a vote, right? Which is the hope, right? Is that they pull it out in the Senate before it even gets sent back to the House.
Because, well, even before it gets to, so after the markup is done in the Senate, it's going to go to a full floor vote in the Senate. And at that time, any senator can offer an amendment to what's there.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure Senator Daines will do that if
it makes it
taken care of.
Yeah.
The more practical idea, because, and this is just the world we live in, and it happens on the left and it happens on the right. If you make a public vote, like in the last administration when you had a Democratic president, if you were a Democratic senator and you delayed something, you got taken to the woodshed. Not just by your leadership, but by the media that is more left focused. Right now, same thing applies on the right, on the Republican side. You got a Republican president, and if you slow this process down publicly, that media machine on that side and that leadership and those big donors on that side are going to make your life miserable. So, the last administration and this administration, most of the deal making, if you want to call it that, happens quietly behind the scenes. So the best thing that could happen is Senator Daines can gain support from enough other senators to come to the majority leader in the Senate, Senator Thune, and say, hey, we don't want to have a big public fight about this, but there's 6 of us who are not going to stand for what Senator Lee puts in there.
Right. Yeah, and I guess to put it into context, like where we're at right now, I mean, and it shouldn't be a partisan issue, but sometimes it ends up looking that way.
Yeah.
But right now, it's, essentially all the Democrats are going to oppose the public land sale.
Right. They're going to oppose everything that's in that bill.
Right.
So by default, they're going to oppose the public land.
But yeah, exactly. And so right now with the Republican side, you basically need four of them to support public lands and oppose the public land sale. So in theory, right now we should have Daines and Sheehy because they have been voicing, their opposition to this pretty publicly.
Right.
So that's two. And then the next two, it's like, in theory, we would hope somebody from the Western United States. And the most promising right now is probably Idaho.
Absolutely Idaho.
Yeah. Because Wyoming, it almost seems like they kind of wrote it off. Loomis and Brasso, they did their deals, and they're standing pretty hard on not going this way. But in Idaho, Senator Crapo, it seems like he's on the fence. Risch maybe a little less hopeful. But so Crapo and Risch are probably the best bets.
Right. So, last week I did a video and I said I heard some deals have been cut. And that turned out to be true. Senator Lee went to the Wyoming Senators, and they got everything they wanted in Wyoming. Mm-hmm. They got better deal for oil and gas, better deal for coal. There's new language supposedly coming that's going to be a better deal for public land grazers. But Wyoming's second biggest economy is outdoor rec. Outdoor rec got zero out of that. Hunters, backpackers, mountain bikers, campers got zero out of the deal that Wyoming struck with Mike Lee. So a lot of people think that I was referring to the Montana delegation struck a deal. No, Montana delegation got put in the bullpen.
Yeah, I mean, you can see why people thought that, though, just because Montana was excluded from that. But like you said, that's not what happened. So it's important to have your facts straight when you're looking at this.
Absolutely. So to your point of Idaho, the two Idaho senators, if you look at that map of land that could be sold, not that it's all getting sold, but could be nominated.
Yeah.
Some of Idaho's best hunting and fishing lands are on that map.
Yeah.
And when I went there on Sunday night, I was told, those guys are pretty conservative dudes, and good luck with that. By last night, the report was they are getting flooded. And let's keep the flood going.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there is a lot of hunters and anglers and public land users in Idaho.
Right.
And these guys care about these lands, and they're starting to voice their concern. So that's good.
So let's assume that Senator Lee has enough sway with others to keep his deal in there. And so it passes the Senate. Senator Daines isn't able to get it out of there. Because on Monday, when the vote counts were being done, there was not enough support to kill it in the Senate. But I think that's changing. But let's say it doesn't change, and it's in the package that the Senate approves it, and Senator Daines proposes an amendment on the Senate floor. He doesn't have enough votes, and it goes to the House. In the House, our Congressman Zinke, his senior people are like, "Don't worry about it."
He said he's a hard no.
This is so far over any line, and he used the term, "This is my San Juan Hill." And then they told me, you can tell the whole world that. We're not voting for this if that's in there.
Right.
So the margin in the House is smaller than the margin in the Senate, which is very unusual. Usually the House has a big margin. So Congressman Zinke.
Yeah.
Did I say Senator Zinke? I meant Congressman.
Congressman Zinke, yeah.
I'm so tired, I'm probably going to get it mixed up. Congressman Simpson from Southeast Idaho has always been a great advocate on this.
Yep.
Their people have said, we're not in favor of this. All we need is 4 U.S. representatives. And they are there to be had. You look at, Congressman Hurd from Grand Junction, Colorado, one of the outdoor rec capitals of the world.
Yeah.
He's getting inundated. So there's a lot of opportunity there to bring more of a coalition, if you want to call it, to support Congressman Zinke.
Right. So, because Zinke he formed the Public Lands Caucus, which we talked about in the past. And so there's, if you include everyone in that, you just need 4 additional senators to come over.
Congressmen.
Or sorry. Congressmen on the House side. So to come over and support that agenda, I guess.
Yeah. So, this is probably what's a frustration and why I started with the reasons why I go back there. Our audience is counting on us to filter through the BS of what's true and what's not true. Mm-hmm. And that happens because of relationships, and it happens because you show up and you are there. And over time, you build relationships where people will tell you things that they're not going to tell a reporter from the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or Politico or the Guardian or Fox News. And we just, as much as people are going to say, Newberg, you're sounding like a salesperson for this. Right now, Senator Daines of Montana, Congressman Zinke of Montana are the backstop. They're the safety net. And people who don't have their facts straight and are hammering those guys are doing us no favors. They're hurting us. And that's why you have to have your shit organized. You can't, if people give you a platform and they trust that you're going to lead them and shoot them straight. And when you go and regurgitate 4th generation rumors from some clickbait news site, you're not doing us any favors as public land advocates, and you're not doing your viewers any favors.
Yeah, so for sure. So do we want to quickly go over again, getting your facts straight? What are they? The fact is that they are in this, and again, we talk about how everything changes so rapidly, so this could change, but that's the thing, to just keep updated on it. So in this amendment, it's to sell up to 3.3 million acres in this version, not 250 million. The 250 million is just the acreage that has been identified as
possibly could be nominated.
Right. So again, neither one is good, but it's just helpful to have your facts straight. It's not national parks, it's not national recreation areas, it's not wilderness areas.
Right.
But it is a significant chunk of BLM and Forest Service lands that are amazing hunting areas.
Absolutely.
So, but just getting our facts straight. Right now, Daines and Zinke are on board. They, like you said, they are the backstop. These are the guys that are fighting for it on the Republican side right now.
Yeah.
So keep cheering them on. And then in Idaho, that could be the best chance in the Senate to get this thing killed, is if you can convince Crapo and Risch that this is a bad idea and Idaho residents do not want this.
Right.
If it comes to the House, Zinke is our champion for trying to stop this on the Republican side, in addition to the Public Lands Caucus.
Right.
And then there's just a handful of other people. What were you mentioned something about the RV?
Right.
So what were the congressmen, congressmen that were kind of...
so Elkhart County, Indiana calls itself the RV capital of the world, because some ridiculous percentage of travel trailers, motorhomes are built in Elkhart County, Indiana. The association that represents these manufacturers and these groups that sell them, they came out yesterday against this. So if he's your rep,
Representative Rudy Yikim.
Yep. Yeah. Rudy something. Yeah. He should be getting calls.
Yeah.
If he's in your area. Then you have Senators
Todd Young
and Jim
Banks.
They should be getting calls.
Mm-hmm.
And so if anyone's asking, well, what can I do? I don't live in one of those places. What you can do is continue to flood the senators. Be persistent, be professional, because every naysayer told us we were crazy. They told us, oh, you're making something out of nothing. The wolf's not at the door. The wolf is at the door. And in the last week, people showed up and said, we're going to run that wolf off. And everybody in D.C. thought that we were BSing them about how much blowback was going to come on all sides, from all places, when it comes to public lands. And now they're like, holy shit, we'll keep it up. Don't take we have our foot on the throat right now. Do not take your foot off the throat. Be professional, be persistent, get every hunting friend, every camping friend, hiking friend you have, and I don't care where you live, contact your senators, because if those senators, even from states that maybe are a little, the last thing those senators want is for Mike Lee to slow down and ruin the big, beautiful bill. And the more we can put him on an island with his few little friends, the better the chance are that we're going to kill this. And I'm 100% convinced, based on what I've seen the last 4 days, we're going to win. This is going to get killed either behind the scenes in the Senate, or it's just going to get stripped out in the House. Maybe I'll be wrong. I don't think so. The way that people have responded to this, all of you, I can't thank you enough, because you guys have been doing the hard work. You've been taking the time. You've made it part of your day to email, to phone call. And as much as people say they never listen to us, they're listening to us, because we finally all came together. And now's not the time to slow down. And one of the things I know, the reason I know it's working is because every 3 or 4 hours, there's more stuff like, well, they're thinking of changing this. They're thinking, oh, this person is like, oh, I don't. Keep on it. Don't give up. Now, we're here to win, right? I don't give a shit about left, right, RD. I'm here to win. And we're winning right now because of all the people who watch this and other platforms. We're winning right now, and we're going to win.
If you could wrap this up, in terms of what Mike Lee's trying to do, it seems like so many people are against it. So why, do you think, why is he still sticking with this idea?
It's purely ideological. It comes across as borderline religious with him, that this has been his ideology since he's been involved in public service. And there's the old saying that pigs get fat, but hogs get slaughtered. And in this case, rather than sit down and compromise and work to solve a problem, Mike Lee's proposal is a full-on land rush. Like, I'm going to be here. I'm going to get everything I can. I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to put a stick in your eye. Well, if pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered, it's our job to make sure Mike Lee's proposal is the hog that gets slaughtered. And right now, we're making a lot of progress towards that. His idea is really close to getting in the slaughterhouse. And you, our listeners, all the people who love public lands, it's our job to slaughter that idea that Mike Lee has put out there.
Well, that is a fantastic call to action to end on. Thank you for all of the insight. Thank you for going to DC and doing this. We all appreciate it. And just, sorting out the BS, and hopefully this idea dies.
Keep on them, folks. We have our foot on their throat. Do not let them get any air at this point. All figuratively. Politically, figuratively.